A ridiculous neighbor repeatedly trespassed on my private rural property and ended up injuring my dog. Here is what happens to trespassers. And the title story starts like this. I have been on my property for close to 10 years, and it was not until about 2 years ago that I started having trespassing problems. I own a farm in Texas, and I make sure to maintain the boundaries around it, checking on the wood fencing that I have circling the area. My farm borders another farm to the west and one on the north side. My house is closer to the southeastern side, where there's a good few hundred acres owned by the state in the east, which includes a few small creeks and lakes. There is a rural development to the south that adds a new house maybe once every 3 years. There aren't any roads nearby, so most of the traffic we get around the area is by foot. With the development close by, I've had to make sure to clearly label where my property begins. I use the usual standard signs and have cameras set up around the south side, since that is where most people come up from. I've also got a German Shepherd, Rocky, who helps to deter trespassers. I think I had maybe one instance before where one of my neighbors did not get the hint and Rocky had to chase them off my land. That has usually stopped them from trying again. No one got hurt, and even if Rocky did bite someone, it would be because the person did not see the signs. Now on to David, name changed for this story. I ran into David attempting to hop over my fence near the southwest side of the property the second week of June. He had a bag full of fishing gear in one hand and a rod in the other. The only reason I caught him was because I was out checking the fences for any breaks and if there was damage to any of the no trespassing signs. I actually saw him hoist himself up and over the fence, and he gave me a little wave when he saw me. This is roughly how our encounter went. David: "Well, hey there." Me: "Hey, can I ask you what you're doing on my property?" David: "Oh, sorry, I'm David, last name. I won't be here long, just gotta cut across the way here." Me: "There's signs up about trespassing. Are you blind?" David: "I'm not. I just figured I used this shortcut for the past few weeks and it's just so much easier than going all the way around the fence." "So you've been trespassing on my property for weeks now?" David: "I'm literally just passing through. I'm not doing anything on your land. I'm not disturbing anything." He starts to get moving. Me: "Well, get back over that fence right now." David: "Listen, just I'm giving you to the count of 3 to get back over that fence and off my property." I did not want to threaten him, even if I could have. I do carry a gun just in case a coyote or a big cat make it through the fence, but I didn't have it with me at the time. Also, Rocky was inside my house, so I couldn't use him, but I'm a big enough guy that I could rough David up if he didn't take the warning. He did end up climbing back over the fence, though the way he kept looking back at me made me feel like that was not going to be the last time he would try to get back on my property. I set up 2 of my cameras to focus on the southwestern side now that I knew that David had been on my property multiple times. I did check the cameras back to see if they picked him up, but either he knew where they were or used another place of entry, because I only saw him once all the way back in the middle of May. For a while there was nothing. I did catch him get close to the property line, but he kept on the correct side of the fence. He did flip off my camera, but that was it. But then around the end of June, I heard Rocky barking at something. I grabbed my gun and headed towards where Rocky was, only to find him cornering David against the fence. He had jumped it again. Me: "I thought I told you to stay off my property." David: "Call your dog off and I will leave." I did, and he immediately hopped back over to his side of the fence. I knew there would be another attempt, and David did not seem like the guy who would take a hint, and he already showed me that he was willing to get back on my land again when he thought I was not looking. I decided to be a bit more civil with my warnings. I got some purple paint and put it on parts of my fence all around my property, just letting everyone know that the property was private and should not be trespassed on. Just putting the explanation of that in here, I don't think it's common in other parts of the US. David also had given me his full name, so I was able to find an address for him without too much trouble. I then sent him a certified letter to formally advise him against trespassing on my property again. I thought maybe with the approach he would take the hint, but 2 days later I heard Rocky barking again near the southwestern part of the farm. Then the barking stopped and I heard him whimper. I ran to find him and saw David dealing a solid kick to my dog's stomach while Rocky's on the ground. As soon as he looked up and saw me, David ran back towards the fence and booked it out of there. I took Rocky to the vet since I could tell he was having trouble breathing. The vet told me that David had broken one of Rocky's ribs and it was pressing against his lung. He also had a broken back leg, meaning that David had stomped on my dog before I got there. I saw red, I truly did. There were a lot of thoughts in my head when Rocky was in surgery, and all of them had David getting what he deserved for hurting my dog. I'll admit, it took me a few days to calm down, and even after Rocky was released back into my care, I was still ready for a fight with that man. I started carrying my gun around more often. Since Rocky was still recovering, I did not want him to pop his stitching or, God forbid, get attacked by David again and have maybe something else happen. So I did the patrolling more often than not while Rocky slowly worked back to full health. A good month after Rocky's attack, I decided to let him out to run for a bit. Almost immediately though, after getting out of the house, he made a beeline for the southwest corner of the property, barking all the way. I grabbed my gun and headed after him, already seeing David making his way over the fence. I fired a warning shot to let him know I was serious and to get his attention as I made my way over. Rocky was trying to keep him from getting all the way over the fence, advancing slowly to nip at his heels. Me, I told you to stay off my property. Are you that stupid? David, get your damn dog away from me, or I swear I will. Me, just try it. And try he did. He lifted his foot, and just before he could bring it down on Rocky, I shot him. It knocked him onto the other side of the fence, and I could hear him sputtering when he got the wind knocked out of him. Then he started yelling, but I couldn't for the life of me understand what he was saying. I watched him limp away, cursing at the top of his voice. I thought that was the end of it, but I got a letter a week later letting me know that I was requested in court for maiming David. I admit I laughed when I got it. I thought this was a joke, but it was notarized and there was paperwork in the envelope that I needed to fill out and provide to the courthouse before my court date. I got a lawyer and gave her my side of the story, providing her with the video footage from the 2 cameras that caught every time he hopped into my yard and captured exactly what he did to Rocky. There was footage of me shooting him, but my lawyer told me that because he was attempting to get onto my side of the fence and attack my dog, I was within my rights to actually shoot him. We do have stand your ground laws and castle doctrine in Texas, so my actions could be seen as defending my property and my dog. The court date came and it was pretty clear that the case David had against me was not gonna stick. My lawyer was able to provide undeniable proof of the trespassing and that I'd warned him several times before I even shot him. I had decided to counter David's accusations with my own, wanting him to pay for trespassing and hurting my dog. The process took months to clear me of my charges and to have charges brought against David, but eventually he was charged with trespassing and animal cruelty. I really did not want to squeeze him for money, but I did want him to pay for all of Rocky's surgeries and vet visits. I felt that was compensation enough. After the court date, I heard that David packed up and left less than a month later. I don't know if he was just done with living nearby, but I say good riddance. It took Rocky a good year to be as active as he was before, but he's doing much better and I'm grateful that he's still with me. And yeah guys, if an awful neighbor ever hurt your dog or your pet in general, what would you have done? Would you have also shot him just like OP? Let me know in the comments. The next one is another crazy neighbor story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, "Am I the jerk for standing up to my neighbor who called the cops on me for walking?" So for context, I've been on a weight loss journey for the past few months. I'm about 50 pounds overweight and finally decided to make some lifestyle changes. My strategy has been simple but effective. I don't keep junk food in the house. If I want something unhealthy, I have to physically walk to get it. The mini mart is about a mile away, so it's a decent walk, enough to make me think twice about whether I really need these chips or that ice cream. So far, it's been working pretty well. I've lost about 15 pounds in 3 months and the incident that started this whole mess happened about 2 weeks ago. Around 9 PM, I got a serious craving for nachos. You know, the kind, warm tortilla chips smothered in that questionable yellow cheese substance that's probably 1 molecule away from plastic. I debated with myself for about 30 minutes before finally giving in. The mini-mart closes at 10, so I figured I had enough time to make the trip. The weather was nice, cool but not cold, with a clear sky full of stars. I was not in any particular rush, so I was just strolling along, enjoying the evening air. I was not looking at my phone. I actually hate how everyone walks around these days staring at a screen, and I was not with anyone or walking a dog. It was just me walking and thinking about those nachos. On my way back, warm nachos in hand and feeling pretty good about at least getting some exercise before indulging, a police cruiser slowly pulled up beside me. My first thought was that something had happened in the neighborhood, maybe a break-in or something. The officer rolled down his window and asked if he could speak with me for a moment. "Good evening, sir," he said, polite but clearly sizing me up. "Mind if I ask what you're doing out tonight?" I was confused. "Just walking home with some nachos," I replied, holding up the paper bag as evidence. "Where do you live?" he asked. I told him my address, which was just 3 blocks away. "Can I get some ID, please?" Now I was starting to get irritated. "I don't really carry my wallet when I go for walks. Is there a problem, officer?" He explained that I had received a call about a so-called suspicious person walking around the neighborhood. Apparently, this was not the first time they had gotten such a call with my description. The caller had even provided security camera footage showing me walking past their house, which clearly displayed my tattoos on my forearms. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Officer, I've lived here for 6 years. I'm literally just a guy walking home with nachos. How is that suspicious?" The officer seemed a bit embarrassed. "Look, I'm just following up on the call. According to the caller, you were suspicious because you were not looking at your phone, you were not walking a dog, and you were not with other people." I nearly burst out laughing from the absurdity. So I'm suspicious because I'm walking normally? Not staring at a screen like a zombie? After verifying my address, he followed me home and watched me use my key to enter my house. The officer apologized for the inconvenience and left. I was too baffled to even be properly angry. What kind of world do we live in where walking without a phone, dog, or companion makes you suspicious? The next day, I was still thinking about the incident when I went to get my mail. That is when I noticed my neighbor across the street watching me from behind her curtains. She quickly moved away when she saw me looking. Something clicked. This had to be the person who called the cops on me. My suspicion was confirmed a few days later when I went for another evening walk, this time for ice cream. As I passed her house, I saw the security camera mounted near her porch pointed directly at the sidewalk. When I returned 20 minutes later, there was a police car parked outside my house. The same officer from before was waiting for me. "Sir, I apologize, but we received another call," he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Let me guess, same neighbor, same complaint?" I asked. He nodded. "Look, I know you live here, and this is getting ridiculous." We chatted for a bit and I learned that this particular neighbor had a habit of calling the cops about so-called suspicious activity in the neighborhood. The officer did not name names due to privacy concerns, but his eyes kept darting towards the house with the security camera. After the second incident, I decided I needed to do something. I was not gonna let some nosy neighbor prevent me from walking in my own neighborhood. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I printed out a t-shirt. Yes, a t-shirt. On the front it said, "I effin' live here," in big bold letters. On the back it had my street address. Childish? Perhaps. Effective? We would see. The next evening, I put on my new shirt and went for my walk. As I passed the neighbor's house, I made a point of walking slowly, making eye contact with the security camera and giving a friendly wave. I could see the curtains moving, but I just smiled and continued on my way. When I returned with my contraband, sour cream and onion chips this time, there were no police cars waiting. Victory! I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The following day, I received a letter in my mailbox. It was not postmarked, it had been hand-delivered. Inside was a printed note that read, "Your vulgar shirt is offensive to families with children in this neighborhood. Please refrain from wearing inappropriate clothing in public." Now I was getting annoyed. This person had called the cops on me twice for just walking, and now they were policing my clothing? Oh yeah, it was on. I decided to escalate things a bit. I bought a cheap dog leash and attached it to a stuffed animal, a large plush dog I found at a thrift store. The next evening, I put on my "I effin' live here" shirt and walked my stuffed dog and stared at my phone the entire time. I was not actually using it, I was just holding up in front of my face. I must have looked absolutely ridiculous, but I didn't care. I was making a point here. As I passed the neighbor's house, I heard the front door open. A woman in her 50s with a tight bun and glasses perched on the end of her nose stepped onto her porch. "Excuse me," she called out in a clipped tone. "What do you think you're doing?" I stopped and turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral. "Good evening. I'm just walking my dog and checking my phone while also advertising that I am in fact a resident of this neighborhood. Is there a problem?" Her face turned an impressive shade of red. "This is unacceptable behavior." "You are mocking me." "Mocking you?" I asked innocently. "I don't even know you. I'm just following the apparent rules for not appearing suspicious in my own neighborhood." "I know what you're doing," she hissed, "and that shirt is completely inappropriate." I shrugged. Well, it did seem necessary after someone kept calling the police on me for just walking. By the way, do you happen to know anything about that? She straightened up, trying to look dignified. Well, I'm the head of the neighborhood watch, and it's my duty to report suspicious activity. And what exactly was suspicious about me walking to the store? You were lurking, walking slowly, looking at houses. I was walking around at a normal pace, and yes, occasionally I look around rather than at the ground. It's called being aware of my surroundings. She sniffed disapprovingly. Well, I've never seen you before. I've lived here for 6 years, I said, my voice rising slightly. Actually, I live 3 houses down and across the street from you. We have even nodded to each other at the mailboxes. Well, I don't remember that, she said dismissively, and regardless, your current behavior is disturbing the peace. At this point, a small crowd of neighbors had begun to gather, watching our exchange with interest. Some were openly snickering at my stuffed animal dog and the shirt. One of my other neighbors, an older man who lived next door to me, stepped forward. Susan, leave the poor guy alone. He does live here. I've seen him mowing his lawn for years. Susan, not her real name, obviously looked around and realized she was losing the audience. Well, the shirt is still inappropriate, she muttered. Another neighbor, a young mom with a baby on her hip, spoke up. I think it's hilarious, and honestly, Susan, you need to stop calling the cops for every little thing. Last month you called them because my sister was sitting in her car outside my house for 5 minutes while on a phone call. Susan's face was now a concerning shade of purple. Without another word, she turned and marched back into her house, slamming the door behind her. The impromptu neighborhood gathering turned into an unexpected bonding session. For the next 20 minutes we all shared our Susan stories. Apparently, she had called the cops on numerous neighbors for infractions such as having a trash can out a day early, kids playing basketball in their own driveway past 7 p.m, and a delivery driver who looked suspicious. He, by the way, was just lost and checking addresses. I thought that might be the end of it, but Susan was not done with me yet. The next day, I received an official-looking letter from the Neighborhood Association, which I had not even known existed. This one stated that I was in violation of the neighborhood dress code policy and that continued violations would result in fines. I did some digging and discovered that while there was indeed a loosely organized neighborhood association, it had no legal authority to impose fines or enforce dress codes. Susan had apparently appointed herself to be president a few years back, and most people just ignored the occasional bizarre newsletter or complaint. I decided to attend the next association meeting, which was conveniently scheduled for that weekend. I showed up in my I effin' live here shirt, of course. The meeting was held in Susan's living room and only 5 people were there. Susan, her husband who looked permanently exhausted, and 3 elderly neighbors who seemed confused about why they were actually there. When I walked in, Susan's eyes nearly bulged out of her head. "You cannot wear that here." "Well, actually I can," I replied calmly. I have reviewed the association bylaws, which by the way have not been properly filed with the county, and there's no mention of a dress code, and also, this association has no legal authority to impose any fines. Her husband looked up, suddenly interested. "I've been telling you that for years, Susan." The meeting quickly devolved from there. The elderly neighbors started asking why their dues, $25 a year, had not resulted in the promised community garden, and Susan's husband took the opportunity to mention that perhaps calling the cops on neighbors was not the best use of community resources. By the end of this meeting, Susan was outvoted as president and her husband was elected as the new president. He immediately abolished all rules and suggested the dues be used for a block party instead, and I'd made some new friends in the neighborhood. Susan, however, was not done with me. The next day I received a cease and desist letter from a lawyer claiming I had defamed her character and caused her emotional distress with my targeted harassment campaign. I consulted with a lawyer friend who reviewed the letter and laughed. "This is nonsense," he said. "You have not defamed anyone. You wore a shirt stating you live in the neighborhood and walked on public sidewalks. If anything, her repeated false police reports about you could be considered harassment." He helped me draft a response letter politely suggesting that further legal threats would result in a countersuit for harassment and filing false police reports. We also included a copy of the local ordinance regarding misuse of emergency services. And yes, we never heard back from Susan or her lawyer. The story does have a happy ending though. The new neighborhood association president, Susan's husband, organized that block party and almost everyone attended. Susan stayed inside her house, peeking through the curtains occasionally. The police officer who had been called to check on me twice even stopped by off-duty, had a burger and shared some stories about other ridiculous calls he's had to respond to. As for me, I still go for my walks whenever I have a craving. I've retired the I effin' live here shirt, though it hangs proudly in my closet as a memento, and I've lost another 10 pounds. Sometimes I bring my phone, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I even bring my real dog. I adopted one from the shelter a few weeks after all this happened, and sometimes I walk alone. The important thing is, I walk like I belong here, because I do. So Reddit, am I the jerk for making a shirt that said I effin' live here and walking my stuffed dog around the neighborhood to make a point to my neighbor who kept calling the cops on me? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments whether you think OP was the a-hole or not. Comment number 1 said, absolutely NTA, that neighbor was power tripping so hard. Calling the cops on someone for walking in their own neighborhood? You handled it with humor instead of escalating to real conflict. The shirt was genius by the way. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, and I'm dying at the stuffed dog part. That's exactly the right level of petty response to such an absurd situation. Comment number 3, you are the a-hole big time. Who do you think you are walking around at night? As a homeowner, Susan has every right to protect her property values from suspicious characters, and that t-shirt was disgustingly vulgar. There are children in that neighborhood, and mocking her with a fake dog? That's bullying. If you were really trying to lose weight, maybe try a treadmill like a normal person, instead of creeping around respectable neighborhoods after dark. Honestly, Susan was just being a responsible citizen, and you humiliated her. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about that ridiculous comment. But indeed he was right, Susan was just being a respectable and responsible Karen, acting exactly the way we would expect them to do. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/pettyrevenge that you don't want to miss. It is titled CRA Scammed, I Pranked. So, a few years ago, the CRA, aka Canadian Revenue Agency, scammers kept calling every few months telling me that I owed them a lot of money and that the police were on their way to arrest me. Well, finally, I got fed up after a year of calls and told them in a very cheerful voice that my brother, brother-in-law and neighbor were on the fraud squad. Which is not true by the way. I will call them to see what time they are coming over, so I can make sure the coffee pot is on and I will have their favorite cookies and cakes baked and ready for them when they come to arrest me. I have not heard from those scammers since. And yeah guys, if you've ever pranked a scammer, please let me know in the comments, otherwise I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much.